You don't control your day. The first 90 seconds after you open your eyes do. And I'm not talking about motivation talk. I'm not talking about some guy on the internet telling you to make your bed and drink cold water. I'm talking about physics. Real, measurable, unavoidable physics. Newton's first law says an object in motion stays in motion unless something stops it, and an object at rest stays at rest unless something forces it to move. Nobody ever tells you that you are the object, and whatever direction you're moving in the first few minutes of being conscious, calm or chaotic, focused or scattered, physics keeps you moving in that exact direction for the next 16 hours. Today I'm going to show you the one mechanical mistake baked into almost every single morning on this planet, why your brain physically cannot fight it with willpower alone, and the one-line fix a physicist would actually make if they were living your life. And by the end of this video, you're going to look at your alarm clock completely differently. Stick around, because the reveal near the end is going to make you rethink literally everything about how you start your day, and probably how you handle every big reset moment in your life too. Let's start with something you already know but have never actually sat down and thought about. Every single morning your body wakes up in a state of rest, not just mentally, physically. Your muscles are relaxed, your heart rate is at its lowest point of the entire day, your core body temperature is sitting at its daily minimum, your blood pressure is lower than it will be at almost any other point before you sleep again. In physics terms, you are, quite literally, a system at rest. And Newton's first law, the law of inertia, says an object at rest stays at rest unless an external force acts on it. That's not a metaphor I'm stretching to make a point. That's a literal, accurate description of your actual body at 6 in the morning. Your nervous system doesn't want to move. Everything about your biology, right down to individual cells, is fighting to stay exactly where it is in that low-energy resting state for as long as possible. So here's the open loop I want you sitting with for the next few minutes, because we're going to come back to it. If your body wants to stay at rest, and physics says it takes an outside force to change that, then whatever force hits you first, the alarm, the phone, the panic, the coffee, the sunlight through the window, that force is going to define the shape of your entire day. Not because of motivation, not because of some mystical morning energy, because of mechanics. Cold, simple, Newtonian mechanics. And most people, without ever realizing it, are choosing the single worst possible force to wake up with, every single day on autopilot. I'll show you exactly what that is, and exactly why it backfires so badly. But first you need to understand what's actually happening inside a physical system when it transitions from rest to motion, because this is where it gets genuinely wild. Think about pushing a stalled car. If you've ever actually done this, you know the first 3 feet are brutal. Your legs burn, your back strains. The car barely creeps forward, no matter how hard you push. But once that car is rolling, once it has even a small amount of momentum, you can practically nudge it along with 2 fingers on the trunk. That's not you getting stronger halfway through the push. That's physics. The force needed to start motion from a dead stop is dramatically, sometimes exponentially, higher than the force needed to sustain motion that's already happening. This is the difference between static friction and kinetic friction. And it's one of the most underrated concepts in your entire life, because your brain works almost exactly the same way. Your brain, first thing in the morning, is that stalled car. The hardest work of your entire day isn't the deep focus task you've got scheduled at 2 in the afternoon. It isn't the difficult conversation waiting for you at 4. It's the 3 feet right after you open your eyes. That's where the single highest amount of resistance in your entire day lies, packed into a window of maybe 90 seconds. And here's the part that should genuinely bother you once you see it clearly. Most people spend that critical high-resistance window, the one moment where a small, deliberate push in the right direction could set the entire day rolling smoothly on the single worst possible input available to them: the phone. Picture this, because you've almost certainly lived it. The alarm goes off. Your eyes are barely open. Your hand reaches out on autopilot, grabs the phone off the nightstand, and your thumb starts scrolling before your brain has even fully rebooted. In that exact moment, you have applied a force to a system that was, seconds ago, completely at rest. Congratulations, you just started your day's motion. Except the direction of that force wasn't calm, wasn't chosen, wasn't intentional in any way. It was scattered by design. 15 notifications competing for your attention. A stranger's opinion you didn't ask for. A video that has absolutely nothing to do with your actual life. A stress spike from an email you weren't emotionally ready to open at 6 in the morning. Newton's first law doesn't care whether the force you applied was good for you or bad with you. It only cares that a force was applied and that the object, you, is now in motion in that specific direction. And an object in motion tends to stay in motion along that same trajectory unless something else acts on it to change course. This is the mid-video twist most people never see coming, so lean in for this part. You'd assume the fix here is just willpower, just deciding, consciously, to not check your phone first thing. But willpower is a genuinely terrible tool against inertia, and here's exactly why. In strict physics terms, not just self-help terms, willpower is a mental force, generated consciously, usually under some form of stress or effort. Inertia is a physical property of mass already in motion. You cannot outthink a system that's already accelerating in a direction. By the time you consciously decide at, say, 9 in the morning, that you actually want to feel calm and focused for the rest of the day, your nervous system has already been in motion, in the scattered, reactive direction, for 3 straight hours. You're not fighting a bad mood at that point. You're fighting accumulated momentum. And momentum, in physics, only meaningfully responds to force applied early, applied right at the point of rest, not force applied after the object is already rolling downhill. Now let's bring in a second law, because inertia is genuinely only half of this story. The other half is entropy. Entropy, in simple terms, is the tendency of any system to drift from order into disorder unless energy is deliberately and continuously spent to maintain that order. Your bedroom doesn't tidy itself. Your inbox doesn't organize itself. Left completely alone, systems drift toward chaos, and that drift costs zero effort. It happens automatically. Undoing that chaos, restoring order, always costs real energy, real attention. Here's the part most people miss entirely. Your mind, right after waking from sleep, is sitting in an unusually low entropy state. It's actually quiet, blank, uncluttered, more ordered than it will be at almost any other point in the next 16 hours. That's the single most valuable 5 minutes of mental real estate you're going to get all day. And most people fill it with the most entropic input humanly available to them, an infinite, algorithmically randomized scroll feed, engineered by some of the smartest software teams on the planet, specifically optimized to maximize disorder and unpredictability in your attention. You're taking the calmest, most ordered state your brain will experience in 24 hours. And you're deliberately injecting maximum entropy into it within the first 90 seconds of being conscious. Let's talk about why this small mistake actually cost you the entire day, not just the morning hours. There's a concept in chaotic systems called sensitive dependence on initial conditions. You've almost certainly heard the pop culture version of this, the butterfly effect. A butterfly flaps its wings in one location, and weeks later, that tiny disturbance has theoretically cascaded into a hurricane somewhere else entirely. The real science behind this comes from meteorologist Edward Lorenz's work in the 1960s, where he showed that in sufficiently complex systems, tiny, almost immeasurable differences in starting conditions can produce wildly different, unpredictable outcomes over time. Your day is a chaotic system, in the strict scientific sense of that word. Dozens of variables, your mood, your focus, your patience, your energy levels, your blood sugar, all interacting with each other, compounding on each other, feeding into one another in real time. A small disturbance at the very start of that system, a stressful scroll, a spike of comparison, a jolt of unearned anxiety does not stay small. It compounds hour by hour. By lunchtime, that original 90-second disturbance has fed into a snapped comment at a coworker, a skipped workout you had every intention of doing, a distracted meeting where you contributed nothing, a second wave of scrolling later in the day just to self-soothe from the first wave. None of that was simply a bad day that happened to you. That was one small force, applied at a single point of maximum sensitivity, cascading outward exactly the way chaos theory predicts it will, every single time. Here's a real-life example that makes this land immediately. Think about a pool table at the exact moment of the break. All the balls are perfectly still, tightly packed together in that triangle. The cue ball comes in and makes contact at a certain force, at a certain angle. Now shift that initial contact point by a single millimeter, nothing more, and by the time every ball on that table has stopped moving, the entire layout looks completely different. Same force overall, same table, same player, same everything else. wildly different outcome, purely because of one tiny shift at the single most sensitive moment of the entire game. Your morning is the break shot of your day. Everything that happens after it is just the ball settling into whatever pattern that first contact quietly set in motion, minutes or hours before you even noticed it happening. There's actually a smaller, everyday version of this you can test yourself, and it's almost funny once you notice it. Think about two versions of the exact same commute. In version 1, you wake up rushed. Phone first. 3 tabs of bad news. You're already annoyed before you've left the house, and then someone cuts you off in traffic. In version 2, you wake up with 60 seconds of quiet before anything else touches your attention, and the exact same person cuts you off in the exact same spot on the exact same road. In version 1, that cutoff feels like a personal attack. Your blood pressure spikes, you're gripping the wheel, and that irritation rides shotgun with you into your first meeting. In version 2, the same event barely registers. You might not even remember it happened by lunchtime. Same external event, same road, same driver. Completely different internal outcome, because the system that event landed on was already moving in 2 completely different directions before it even happened. There's one more layer to this that most people never think about, and it's the reason 2 people can go through the exact same morning routine and end up in completely different places by the end of the day. It's called the system's sensitivity to force, and in physics, it depends heavily on mass. A heavier object needs more force to change its motion than a lighter one. Some mornings, your mental mass is heavier than others. Maybe you slept badly. Maybe you're already carrying stress from the day before. Maybe your blood sugar is low. On those heavier mornings, a tiny force isn't enough to redirect you. You need a slightly bigger, more deliberate push, and that's fine. That's not failure. That's just physics responding to a heavier system. This is why the same 60 seconds of quiet works beautifully some days and barely makes a dent on others. It's not that the method stopped working. It's that the mass of the system changed, and the force required to redirect it changed along with it. Understanding this alone removes so much of the guilt people carry when their morning routine doesn't feel like it's working. Because it was never a discipline problem. It was a variable mass problem. And once you know that, you stop blaming yourself and start adjusting the force instead. So if inertia tells us the first force matters more than any force applied later, and entropy tells us your calmest state is also your most valuable and most fragile state, and chaos theory tells us small disturbances at sensitive points compound into disproportionately large outcomes, then what's the actual fix here? It's not more motivation. It's definitely not some rigid 5-step morning routine you'll enthusiastically follow for 11 days and then quietly abandon forever. The real fix is choosing, deliberately and on purpose, what force acts on the system while it's still at rest, before entropy and chaos ever get their hands on it. This is the climax of everything we've covered. So if you take one idea away from this entire video, take this one. The goal isn't to eliminate force acting on you in the morning. That's genuinely impossible. Some force always acts on the system the moment you wake up. That's just physics. Something always breaks the resting state eventually, whether it's an alarm, sunlight, or your own bladder. The real goal is to be the one applying that force on purpose, instead of passively letting a notification, an alarm blaring across the room, or a stranger's opinion on the other side of the internet apply it for you by default. It can be as small as 60 seconds of just breathing before your feet even touch the floor. It can be opening a window instead of opening a screen. It can be writing a single sentence about what you actually want the day to feel like before you check a single message. The specific content of that force matters far less than the simple fact that you chose the direction yourself at the exact moment your system had the least resistance to being redirected. That's the physicist's fix in one sentence. Not more discipline, better timing. And here's the part that should genuinely stick with you long after this video ends. This was never really just about mornings. It's about every single reset point in your entire life. The first day at a new job, the day after a breakup, January 1st, the 60 seconds right after a hard argument before you decide what to say next. Every single one of those moments is a system at rest, sitting at maximum sensitivity, quietly waiting for the first force to come along and define its entire trajectory. Most people let the world apply that force for them by default, without ever noticing there was a choice involved. The ones who understand the physics underneath it apply that force themselves on purpose every time. So here's what I actually want you to do tomorrow morning as a real experiment, not just something you nod along to and forget by lunchtime. Before you touch your phone, before a single notification gets a vote in how your day is going to unfold, apply one small intentional force yourself. That's the entire experiment. That's it. Newton, Lorenz, and pretty much every law of thermodynamics we've talked about today are quietly on your side if you do. If this actually rewired how you think about your own mornings, do me a favor and hit like. It genuinely helps this channel reach more people than you'd think it would. Subscribe if you want more physics explained through the stuff you actually live through every single day, not just equations sitting on a chalkboard somewhere. And drop a comment telling me the one small force you're going to apply tomorrow morning before anything else touches your attention. I actually read every single one of them. See you in the next video.